In 1871, at the age of 8, Narendra entered high school. His exceptional intelligence was soon recognized by his teachers and classmates. Though at first reluctant to study English because of its foreign origin, he soon took it up with avidity. But the curriculum consumed very little of his time. He used most of his inexhaustible energy in outside activities. Games of various kinds, many of which he invented or improvised, kept him occupied. He made an imitation gasworks and a factory of aerating water, these two novelties having just been introduced in Calcutta. He organized an amateur theatrical company and a gymnasium, and took lessons in fencing, wrestling, rowing, and many other manly sports. He also tried his hand at the art of cooking. Intensely restless, he would soon tire of one pastime and seek a new one. With his friends, he visited the museum and the zoological garden. He arbitrated the disputes of his playfellows and was a favorite with the people of the neighborhood. Everybody admired his courage, straightforwardness, and simplicity. From an early age, this remarkable youth had no patience with fear or superstition. One of his boyish pranks had been to climb a flowering tree belonging to a neighbor, pluck the flowers, and do other mischief. The owner of the tree, finding his remonstrances unheeded, once solemnly told Naren's friends that the tree was guarded by a white-robed ghost who would certainly wring their necks if they disturbed his peace. The boys were frightened and kept away. But Narendra persuaded them to follow him back, and he climbed the tree, enjoying his usual measure of fun, and broke some branches by way of further mischief. Turning to his friends, he then said, "What asses you all are! See, my neck is still here. The old man's story is simply not true. Don't believe what others say unless you yourselves know it to be true." These simple but bold words were an indication of his future message to the world. Addressing large audiences in the later years, he would often say, "Do not believe in a thing because you have read about it in a book. Do not believe in a thing because another man has said it was true. Do not believe in words because they are hallowed by tradition. Find out the truth for yourself. Reason it out. That is realization." The following incident illustrates his courage and presence of mind. He one day wished to set up a heavy trapeze in the gymnasium, and so asked the help of some people who were there. Among them was an English sailor. The trapeze fell and knocked the sailor unconscious, and the crowd, thinking him dead, ran away for fear of the police. But Naren tore a piece from his cloth, bandaged the sailor's wound, washed his face with water, and gradually revived him. Then he moved the wounded man to a neighboring schoolhouse, where he nursed him for a week. When the sailor had recovered, Naren sent him away with a little purse collected from his friends. All through this period of boyish play, Narendra retained his admiration for the life of the wandering monk. Pointing to a certain line on the palm of his hand, he would say to his friends, "I shall certainly become a sannyasin. A palmist has predicted it." As Narendra grew into adolescence, his temperament showed a marked change. He became keen about intellectual matters, read serious books on history and literature, devoured newspapers, and attended public meetings. Music was his favorite pastime. He insisted that it should express a lofty idea and arouse the feelings of the musician. At the age of 15, he experienced his first spiritual ecstasy. The family was journeying to Raipur in the central provinces, and the part of the trip had to be made in a bullock cart. On that particular day, the air was crisp and clear. The trees and creepers were covered with green leaves and many colored blossoms. Birds of brilliant plumage warbled in the woods. The cart was moving along a narrow pass where the lofty peaks rising on the two sides almost touched each other. Narendra's eye spied a large beehive in the cleft of a giant cliff, and suddenly his mind was filled with awe and reverence for the divine providence. He lost outer consciousness and lay thus in the cart for a long time. Even after returning to the sense-perceived world, he radiated joy. Another interesting mental phenomenon may be mentioned here, for it was one often experienced by Narendranath. From boyhood, on first beholding certain people or places, he would feel that he had known them before, but how long before he could never remember. One day he and some of his companions were in a room in a friend's house where they were discussing various topics. Something was mentioned, and Narendra felt at once that he had on a previous occasion talked about the same subject with the self-same friends in that very house. He even correctly described every nook and corner of the building, which he had not seen before. He tried at first to explain this singular phenomenon by the doctrine of reincarnation, thinking that perhaps he had lived in that house in a previous life. But he dismissed the idea as improbable. Later he concluded that before his birth he must have had previsions of the people, places, and events that he was to experience in his present incarnation. That was why he thought he could recognize them as soon as they presented themselves to him. At Raipur, Narendra was encouraged by his father to meet notable scholars and discuss with them various intellectual topics, usually considered too abstruse for boys of his age. On such occasions, he exhibited great mental power. From his father, Narendra had learnt the art of grasping the essentials of things, seeing truth from the widest and most comprehensive standpoints, and holding to the real issue under discussion. In 1879, the family returned to Calcutta, and Narendra, within a short time, graduated from high school in the first division. In the meantime, he had to read a great many standard books of English and Bengali literature. History was his favorite subject. He also acquired at this time an unusual method of reading a book and acquiring the knowledge of its subject matter. To quote his own words, "I could understand an author without reading every line of his book. I would read the first and last lines of a paragraph and grasp its meaning. Later I found that I could understand the subject matter by reading only the first and last lines of a page. Afterwards, I could follow the whole trend of a writer's argument by merely reading a few lines, though the author himself tried to explain the subject in 5 or more pages." Soon the excitement of his boyhood days was over, and in 1879, Narendranath entered the Presidency College of Calcutta for higher studies. After a year, he joined the General Assembly's institution, founded by the Scottish General Missionary Board, and later known as the Scottish Church College. It was from Hasti, the principal of the college and professor of English literature, that he heard first the name Sri Ramakrishna. In college, Narendra, now a handsome youth, muscular and agile, though slightly inclined to stoutness, enjoyed serious studies. During the first 2 years, he studied Western logic. Thereafter, he specialized in Western philosophy and the ancient and modern history of the different European nations. His memory was prodigious. It took him only 3 days to assimilate Green's History of the English People. Often, on the eve of an examination, he would read the whole night, keeping awake by drinking strong tea or coffee. About this time, he came in contact with Sri Ramakrishna. This event, as we shall presently see, was to become the major turning point of his life. As a result of his association with Sri Ramakrishna, his innate spiritual yearning was stirred up, and he began to feel the transitoriness of the world and the futility of academic education. The day before his BA examination, he suddenly felt an all-consuming love for God, and standing before the room of a college mate, was heard to sing with great feeling, "Sing ye, O mountains, O clouds, O great winds, sing ye, sing his glory. Sing with joy, all ye suns and moons and stars, sing ye his glory." The friend's surprise reminded him of the next day's examination, but Narendra was unconcerned. The shadow of the approaching monastic life was fast falling on him. He appeared for the examination, however, and easily passed. About Narendra's scholarship, Professor Hasti once remarked, "Narendra is a real genius. I have traveled far and wide, but have not yet come across a lad of his talents and possibilities, even among the philosophical students in the German universities. He is bound to make his mark in life." Narendra's many-sided genius found his expression in music as well. He studied both instrumental and vocal music under expert teachers. He could play on many instruments, but excelled in singing. From a Muslim teacher, he learnt Hindi, Urdu, and Persian songs, most of them of devotional nature. He also became associated with the Brahmo Samaj, an important religious movement of the time, which influenced him during his formative period of life. The introduction of English education in India following the British conquest of the country brought Hindu society in contact with the intellectual and aggressive European culture. The Hindu youths who came under the spell of the new dynamic way of life realized the many shortcomings of their own society. Under the Muslim rule, even before the coming of the British, the dynamic aspect of the Hindu culture had been suppressed and the caste system stratified. The priests controlled the religious life of the people for their own selfish interest. Meaningless dogmas and lifeless ceremonies supplanted the invigorating philosophical teachings of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. The masses were exploited, moreover, by the landlords, and the lot of women was especially pitiable. Following the breakdown of the Muslim rule, chaos reigned in every field of Indian life, social, political, religious, and economic. The newly introduced English education brought into sharp focus the many drawbacks of society, and various reform movements, both liberal and orthodox, were initiated to make the national life flow once more through healthy channels. The Brahmo Samaj, one of these liberal movements, captured the imagination of the educated youths of Bengal. Raja Rammohan Roy, the founder of this religious organization, broke away from the rituals, image worship, and the priestcraft of Orthodox Hinduism, and exhorted his followers to dedicate themselves to the worship and adoration of the eternal, the unsearchable, the immutable being, who is the author and the preserver of the universe. The Raja, endowed with a gigantic intellect, studied the Hindu, Muslim, and Christian and Buddhist scriptures, and was the first Indian to realize the importance of the Western rational method for solving the diverse problems of Hindu society. He took a prominent part in the introduction of English education in India, which, though it at first produced a deleterious effect on the newly awakened Hindu consciousness, ultimately revealed to a few Indians the glorious heritage of their own indigenous civilization. Among the prominent leaders of the Brahmo Samaj who succeeded Ram Mohan Roy was Devendranath Tagore, a great devotee of the Upanishads, and Keshap Chandra Sen, who was inclined to the rituals and doctrines of Christianity. The Brahmo Samaj, under their leadership, discarded many of the conventions of Hinduism, such as rituals and the worship of God through images. Primarily a reformist movement, it directed its main energy to the emancipation of women, the remarriage of Hindu widows, the abolition of early marriage, and the spread of mass education. Influenced by Western culture, the Brahmo Samaj upheld the supremacy of reason, preached against the uncritical acceptance of scriptural authority, and strongly supported the slogans of the French Revolution. The whole movement was intellectual and eclectic in character, born of the necessity of the times. Unlike traditional Hinduism, it had no root in the spiritual experiences of saints and seers. Narendra, like many other contemporary young men, felt the appeal of its progressive ideas and became one of its members. But, as will be presently seen, the Brahmo Samaj could not satisfy the deep spiritual yearning of his soul. About this time, Narendra was urged by his father to marry, and an opportunity soon presented itself. A wealthy man whose daughter Narendra was asked to accept as his bride offered to defray his expenses for higher studies in England so that he might qualify himself for the much coveted Indian civil service. Narendra refused. Other proposals of similar nature produced no different result. Apparently, it was not his destiny to lead a householder's life. From boyhood, Narendra had shown a passion for purity. Whenever his warm and youthful nature tempted him to walk into a questionable adventure, he was held back by an unseen hand. His mother had taught him the value of chastity, had made him observe it as a matter of honor, in loyalty to herself and the family tradition. But purity to Narendra was not a negative virtue, a mere abstention from carnal pleasures. To be pure, he felt, was to conserve an intense spiritual force that would later manifest itself in all the noble aspirations of life. He regarded himself as a brahmacharan, a celibate student of the Hindu tradition, who worked hard, prized ascetic disciplines, held holy things in reverence, and enjoyed clean words, thoughts, and acts. For according to the Hindu scriptures, a man, by means of purity, which is the greatest of all virtues, can experience the subtlest spiritual perceptions. In Naren, it accounts for the great power of concentration, memory, and insight, and for his indomitable mental energy and physical stamina. In his youth, Narendra used to see every night 2 visions, utterly dissimilar in nature, before falling asleep. One was that of a worldly man with an accomplished wife and children, enjoying wealth and luxuries, fame and social position. The other, that of a sannyasin, a wandering monk, bereft of earthly security and devoted to the contemplation of God. Narendra felt that he had the power to realize either of these ideals. But when his mind reflected on their respective virtues, he was inevitably drawn to the life of renunciation. The glamour of the world would fade and disappear. His deeper self instinctively chose the austere path. For a time, the congregational prayers and the devotional songs of the Brahmo Samaj exhilarated Narendra's mind. But soon he found that they did not give him any real spiritual experience. He wanted to realize God, the goal of religion, and so felt the imperative need of being instructed by a man who had seen God. In his eagerness, he went to Devendranath, the venerable leader of the Brahmo Samaj, and asked him, even before the latter had uttered a word, "Sir, have you seen God?" Devendranath was embarrassed and replied, "My boy, you have the eyes of a yogi. You should practice meditation." The youth was disappointed and felt that this teacher was not the man to help him in his spiritual struggle. But he received no better answer from the leaders of other religious sects. Then he remembered having heard the name of Ramakrishna Paramahansa from Professor Hasti, who, while lecturing his class on Wordsworth's poem The Excursion, had spoken of trances, remarking that such religious ecstasies were the result of purity and concentration. He had said further that an exalted experience of this kind was a rare phenomenon, especially in modern times, saying, "I have known only one person who has realized that blessed state, and he is Ramakrishna of Dakshineswar. You will understand trances if you visit this saint." Narendra had also heard about Sri Ramakrishna from a relative, Ramchandra Datta, who was one of the foremost householder disciples of the Master. Learning of Narendra's unwillingness to marry and ascribing it to his desire to lead a spiritual life, Ramchandra had said to him, "If you really want to cultivate spirituality, then visit Ramakrishna at Dakshineswar." Narendra met Ramakrishna for the first time in November 1881 at the house of the Master's devotee Surendranath Mitra, the young man having been invited there to entertain the visitors with his melodious music. The Paramahansa was much impressed by his sincerity and devotion, and after a few inquiries asked him to visit him at Dakshineswar. Narendra accepted. He wished to learn if Ramakrishna was the man to help him in his spiritual quest.